Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to The Plant Path. I'm your host, Sage Popham, founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism and Natura Sophia Spagyrics. And the topic of discussion here this week is on a concept I've been thinking about. This is something I've just been kind of pondering and thinking about over the last number of months and formulating thoughts around. And I want to talk about a concept that I have come to term diagnosis identity, as well as the nature of the human condition and the role of suffering in our lives. I think as herbalists or healers or physicians or doctors or whatever your approach is, I think our main goal is really quite simple. It's to help alleviate suffering from our fellow humans or animals, if there's any vets out there watching or listening. And I would say to take it a little bit further as a vitalist or more of a holistic practitioner, I would say we want to go maybe a little bit further than that and not just relieve suffering, but really help people to build health, to build vitality, try to promote some longevity, and not just have them be symptom-free, but actually live a healthy life where they are building resiliency, I would say, within the body, as well as on other aspects of the self too. And, from here, our medicine is not just is not only healing, right? But we want to utilize our herbs in a way that is preventative as well as rejuvenative at the same time. And, from my approach in the model that I, have coined what I do, I just call it evolutionary herbalism. To me, it's not just working with the plants to alleviate suffering, nor is it just about preventing disease and rejuvenating our health, but also to use the plants to aid in our spiritual development, in our psychological clarity, in our emotional health, emotional stability, emotional buoyancy, being clear within ourselves, and having a perceptual orientation to our life where we're able to draw meaning and feel that we are growing within ourselves, that we're making a positive contribution to our family, our community, that we're living the life, living a good life, that we can look back on from our deathbed and feel proud of a life well lived is really my goal as an herbalist. And I think if there's one thing that I think we can deem as true about life, it is that suffering is inevitable. I think that no matter what, no matter who we are, no matter where we come from, no matter our creed or race or social status or whatever, we will suffer, right? We will encounter challenge in this life. We will struggle. Bad things will happen to us. Difficult things will happen. Territory in life will become challenging to navigate. We might get depressed or anxious or confused or whatever it might be. We will suffer in this life. I think that is really inevitable. In fact, many traditions or cultures and religions state that actually might be one of the most fundamental truths about life, right? It's like a universal truth. I mean, the Buddhism clearly states that all life is suffering. In the Western Judeo-Christian religions, when Adam and Eve committed the original sin and got kicked out of Eden, God basically told Eve that she and all women thereafter would suffer in the birthing and rearing of children, and told Adam and all that he and all men thereafter would suffer in the sacrifice that they have to make in their toils and in their work and sacrificing the present for the future. Indeed, we will suffer in this life, but we will also feel joy and love and laughter and inspiration too. And the way that I think of it is that from a cosmological perspective, it really is only through the suffering and through the struggles in this life that we can know the other side of it. Like we can truly appreciate peace and order and joy and those moments of happiness when it's juxtaposed with the other side of that, right? Which is chaos and struggle and challenge and the unknown. And everything in this life from a cosmological perspective exists within the realm of duality. Light cannot exist without darkness. And I think the same is true within our own life and within our human experiences. And so we're going to have a hard time, right? And I think especially if we're on a healing path, we want to help other people. I think it sometimes comes with goes with the territory that we tend to suffer, maybe a little more, because I think there's some part of us that takes on some of the suffering of the people that we work with, and have to deal with that. When you're dealing with suffering, it can weigh on you. When you're dealing with other people's suffering, I mean. But there is something that I think that happens here that I am noticing a lot in this modern world that we live, and that would be the overmedicalization of the human condition, right? Suffering is inevitable. We're going to have a hard time. But does that necessarily mean that it is a medical problem or a psychological problem? Does it mean that every uncomfortable experience, every life struggle, every challenge we face necessarily needs to be, say, classified as a trauma? And I see the word trauma really used extensively these days. And I admit I talk about trauma. I talk about the importance of the transformation of trauma in our healing process and in our spiritual development and evolution as it relates to our healing journey. But I think really defining what that is important. I think that there should be a clear understanding and distinction made between experiencing a truly traumatizing experience versus experiencing life and experiencing the struggles of life and being in the moments of experiencing a basic human condition that we all experience in some way, shape, or form. And so I think like defining trauma is really, really important because I feel like the word is thrown around willy-nilly a lot these days in reference to things that, in my opinion, and I would say probably in the professional opinion of psychologists, wouldn't technically be classified under the category of trauma. So the truly traumatic experience is something much more than mere emotional upset, getting into an argument or a conflict with a friend or a coworker or a family member, getting fired from your job, or someone saying something offensive to you. Of course, I'm not belittling these experiences. I'm not saying that these are not challenging to navigate, stressful, hurtful, impactful, but traumatic, I'm not sure if they would qualify. A true trauma is something that touches as close to the essence of who you are as something could reach. A wound that touches close upon your essence within your heart. Something that doesn't really shake off of you for many, many years to come, many years after the event. A true trauma is something that, happened a long, long, long time ago in your life and is still affecting you to this day. So according to the American Psychological Association, quote, trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event, like an accident, a crime, natural disaster, physical or emotional abuse, neglect, experiencing or witnessing violence, the death of a loved one, war, and more. Immediately after the event, shock and denial are typical, end quote. So I say this ultimately because I think it's very important that, because what I notice happens is that people have a hard time in life. People get offended by something, or people get into an argument, or something, life starts challenging them. And what happens is that it can become labeled as a trauma, a traumatic event. And then it turns into an excuse for all of someone's problems tying back to this one thing that may not really be as big a deal as they're making it out to be. And again, I'm not saying this to say that our problems aren't problems or struggles or challenges, but I think there is a danger in the over-medicalization of the human condition. And I think we have to be a little bit careful about using terms like PTSD. Like I heard a lot of, like my sister-in-law is a school teacher. She's a high school teacher. And she said that a lot of her students were saying they had, quote, PTSD from having to be at home during a COVID lockdown. And I was really thinking about that. And I was like, really? PTSD? That's a really strong term. Like true PTSD happens from like people that survive a war, people that experience really intense, like they're raped, or they experience child abuse, or they're just completely neglected for weeks on end as a child, or like really like psychologically damaging things like that. Not being able to hang out with your friends socially at school. I don't know if that's going to be in the same category of life event. And what I see and what I notice is that rather than developing a strength of character to overcome the challenges that life presents to us, there becomes this medical labeling of a life challenge, which turns into maybe seeking medical treatment for it, which could potentially be inappropriate, but also it becomes almost this scapegoat where one's problems are put onto this thing, and I'm this way because of that, and I'm this way because of that, and I feel this way because of that, and well, it happened and it's traumatized me and there's nothing I could do. And there's this victim mentality can really emerge, and that is dangerous territory, because that is a psychological trap that one can get into that leads to being very stuck in one's life and incapable of moving forward and maturing and finding solutions to the problems that we face in life. Because life is going to challenge us. Like I said, life is suffering, life challenges happen, but that's a good thing, because that's how we grow. That's how we learn. That's how we become better people. That's how we grow in our knowledge and in our wisdom and in our understanding, is by learning how to navigate life's challenges. So I say all this because ultimately I want people to be healthy physically, mentally, and emotionally. And I don't deny that the healing of trauma is important and requires a multifaceted approach, as does, navigating life challenges requires a multifaceted approach. But I think if you find yourself constantly focusing on your problems and in a state of blame, on past events, on people, on situations, on the culture as a whole, and saying it's all trauma, I'm not really sure that that's a healthy approach to these things. I think it's important to pull back and to really ask yourself if those are genuinely traumatic events, or if they're challenges of life and a part of the human condition. And if so, how can you best navigate it through changing your perceptual orientation on things? I think there is a big piece of this comes down to forgiveness. I think we have to learn to forgive ourselves. I think we need to learn to forgive others. I think we need to learn how to brush ourselves off and move on, move forward, be strong, get the help that we need. Like if we genuinely need help, get the help that we need, and really develop a mode of seeing things and a mode of reflecting on life's events through asking ourselves the question, what is this trying to teach me? Like, what can I learn through this? How can I turn this into something positive? Because I think that's ultimately what challenges represent to us, that we have to learn how to focus on the solutions and not get too myopic on the problems, because the more we focus on the problems, the more we create more problems. And this is this kind of goes back to an alchemical concept, actually. In the alchemical tradition, there's really this concept of transformation, but specifically the transformation, there's a spectrum, a polarity, if you will, of poison and medicine. And that a lot of especially the higher alchemical works involving minerals and metals, involves taking what is on its own a very crude thing, a poison such as antimony, and through proper handling, through proper care, through proper laboratory processes, it is transformed into what is often considered in the higher alchemy a universal medicine, like a panacea. One of the most powerful poisons can become the most powerful medicines if it is prepared correctly and if it is dosed correctly. And I think this is, so I think there's aspects of poison into medicine in the alchemical tradition that has a laboratory attribute to it. I also think it's very symbolic about our psychology, and that through proper handling and preparation of our poisons, of the things that of the traumas that we've experienced, of the struggles that we've experienced, the hard times we've gone through, that when we properly learn how to process it, right? In a similar way, we process materials in laboratory alchemy. You learn how to process it, prepare it, and dose it, right? I.e., don't overdose on it, don't dwell on it, like minuscule amounts, do a little bit at a time. Like process it in a right way, can transform it into a medicine, into a gift. And I think that is I think that's a good way of thinking about it. That rather than blaming all of our problems on the past, that we can transform how we see it, how we perceive it. We can engage in a healing process involving forgiveness, which I think is a very powerful medicine. And ultimately, what was a poison, what was a negative thing, can become a positive thing. And this is like the old adage of, is the glass half full or is it half empty? Well, it depends on how you look at it. And I think the same is true for the struggles that we face and the traumas that we experience. If we learn how to look at it the right way, we can actually extract good. Now, this leads to this concept of diagnosis identity. And I think this is a part of this discussion, but it also can be broader in its scope as well. And I think this is another thing that I notice happening out in the culture that to me is actually a little bit alarming. And I think it can be a little dangerous from a psychological perspective. And that is this concept of diagnosis identity, which is basically when, say, you have a health problem and you go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, you have this, you meet all the diagnostic criteria of this disease, and they give you a diagnosis. You have hypothyroidism, or you have cancer, or you have lupus, or you have depression or PTSD or whatever it might be. This can be a physiological, a psychological, emotional diagnosis, whatever it might be. Well, what can happen with some people sometimes is that in a way that diagnosis somehow becomes kind of like entangled or enmeshed with their identity. Meaning that the disease or the sickness or the problem becomes so enmeshed with their sense of self, with their sense of who they are, that they don't, it's like a part of them kind of holds onto it, clings onto it. And I would say this is actually, what's even more alarming is when this happens from a self-diagnosis. Okay, so this is one of the problems with Google and everybody searching their problems on the internet, is sometimes people don't even get an official diagnosis, but it's a self-diagnosis from Google. And when a diagnostic label becomes something that you're identified with and entangled with the sense of self, this is a really dangerous situation because it becomes an obstacle to cure. So, and had to work through this with clients before where it's like they don't do what they should do to heal themselves. Like a compliance issue, they don't follow the protocol. They say all this stuff, they want to do this, but then they don't follow through. And then it's like when you dig into it and look at it, it's like, hey, do you really want to heal? And it's like, what part of you is clinging on to this? And after kind of teasing that out, you realize like, whoa, like a part of your self-definition is tied to this diagnosis, right? Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I have Hashimoto's disease and narcolepsy, or I can never do that because of my social anxiety, or I can't, it's like, the whole world begins to revolve around that diagnosis, and not a positive way, in like a negative way, in a non-solution seeking way. And for some reason, it seems like in this modern culture that there can be a lot of like people being excessively celebrated based on their shortcomings, based on their traumas, based on their health problems, based on their psychological issues, rather than being celebrated for their positive virtues and characteristics. And so it seems like there can be this thing that happens where people are trying to over exemplify and identify with their problems because of maybe an underlying need for attention or sympathy, or wanting some sort of special treatment, or in the, not everyone does this, but in some instances as a means for manipulating others. And I think this is a little bit of a dangerous situation, specifically it becomes an obstacle to cure. So again, I don't want anyone to misconstrue what I'm saying. People have real problems. People have suffering. People, when people get a diagnosis, it can be very, very scary. Okay. It can, getting a cancer diagnosis, that's a scary thing. Like that's a psychological and emotional blow. That is like a major challenging moment in one's life. To be sure, I'm not doubting that. I'm not denying that. I'm not saying people don't suffer, or that people don't deserve or should, receive compassion or sympathy. I'm also not saying we should just ignore our problems, as obviously that's not a good approach. But what I am saying is that you can't over-identify your sense of self, of who you are with your disease or with your health problem. And you have to learn to cultivate a way of seeing it as an obstacle to overcome. It's like you have to be able to see beyond it. And I think that's where the role of hope and faith come into our healing process, that we have to be able to see onto the other side of it. We can't get too lost. We can't get too scared. We can't get too worried or anxious or depressed about it, because what happens is that now it has power over you. And that's a deep, dark black hole. I think there is a psychological process that happens when we receive especially very serious diagnoses that we have to learn how to navigate that territory. We have to learn to fortify our minds to not fall into the black pits of despair, hopelessness, faithlessness, fear, worry, anxiety. Certainly those things can emerge, but we have to learn to overcome those things. We have to become strong. And I think that strength is how we overpower these types of things. Now, I'm not saying rely only on hope and faith to overcome your health problems. Am I saying only have hope and faith? No, I think it's good to address things from a multifactorial approach. But what I am saying is that if your identity is wrapped up in your diagnosis, it's going to be very hard to heal it, because if you heal it, then who are you? There's a part of the self that latches on to the diagnosis and actually doesn't want to let it go, because if the disease is healed, if the problem is cured, and then it's like, if your identity is wrapped up in it, then you have an identity crisis. And it's like, well, who am I if I don't have my chronic migraines anymore and get the sympathy and the days off work and the paid sick leave and the whatever it might be? Like, there can be ways that our health problems become a crutch, actually, and become a subtle way that sometimes people can manipulate people and situations. Obviously, I'm not saying everybody does that, but it happens. I've seen it happen. Maybe you know someone and have seen that happen as well. So when you let your disease have power over you, or when you overly identify it, you create something that gets in the way of your healing process. So you don't want to do that, right? And this is where I believe we have to learn to cultivate a perspective. We have to find a part of the self that believes and trusts in the intelligence of our body, in the intelligence of nature, in the intelligence of our capacity to self-regulate and to heal ourselves. For us that are into herbs and plants, that we believe in the medicinal plants to heal, and that we believe we have a vision, we have a capacity to envision life beyond our problems, whether that is dealing with trauma, whether that's overcoming a life challenge, whether that's overcoming a chronic disease. Hope and faith, I think, play a critical role in that. I mean, and this has been researched, right? Where, people that receive terminal diagnosis of cancer, for example, the people that have faith, the people that have belief, the people that engage in even active visualizations and affirmations and go to church and pray about it, or go see traditional healers to get worked on, and they can see beyond it, right? Those people tend to heal. Or they live far beyond the doctor's life expectancy for that person, and they blow their minds. They say, how is it that you're living 10 years later when you had a 1 year, life expectancy? Whereas the people that tend to just kind of fall apart and not have hope and become pessimistic and, just fall into the depths of despair around it, tend to not have those types of results. So it's kind of a hard thing to talk about in a way, because it brings up sensitive topics. Like, I'm sure someone watching or listening to this is triggered by it, but maybe that's something worth looking at. Like, if what I'm saying triggers you, it's like, oh, well, maybe there's something here to look at and to understand. I think for practitioners, I think this is something important to keep an eye out for in the people that you work with. Like, if you're having a lot of compliance issues, if they don't seem to just ever get well, if it seems like a part of them is holding on, that needs to be looked at, and because these can turn into complicated situations. Because in some way, people can, in some way, architect benefits from being ill. I'm not saying everyone does that, but it does happen. So poison into medicine, I think this is a really important dynamic for us to consider as practitioners, as well as people, as well as fellow humans, that you have your suffering that you deal with. How can you turn it into something positive? It happens for a reason. We may not deserve it. It may not be fair, but I don't think life operates in terms of fair and unfair. It operates in a weird way, in a mysterious way, what we need in order to learn to grow, and what we need in order to evolve mentally, emotionally, spiritually, to heal physically. Things happen for a reason if we learn to look at it the right way. I believe we live in a world filled with meaning. I believe everything we experience in this life has a meaning to it. And especially the challenge is where we can extract the most meaning if we learn to look at it the right way. So everything is here to teach us something about ourselves. And therein lies a secret, a truth, a power that we can extract, something positive that we can extract from it, that we can move beyond what's on the surface and penetrate into the essence to draw upon something good. Like we've all heard about people that have gone through horrible traumatic events, right? Two children are horribly abused by their father, and one grows up to beat his kids, and the other grows up and is like an amazing, loving father and never strikes his children in anger. Like, what differentiates those two people? Well, obviously there's probably a lot, but I think I would say in the one that turns that pattern around, there is a resolve, an inner resolve that they come to not repeat that, and maybe they grow up and maybe they are there to help other children that have gone through traumatic experiences. There's lots of stories of, women that are raped that go on to heal that trauma and support other women that are struggling with that. Like they take something that was absolutely horrible and they turn it into something good. And that usually oftentimes is in the form of helping other people struggling with something similar so that they can get through to the other side more quickly. So rather than our disease, our suffering, our trauma having power over us, we're being able to define us, we're rise above it and find the gift that is hidden within it. I like to think of this as like that old saying, the blessing in disguise. Hard to see it, right? Really, really hard to see it. But I think that is what faith and belief in something greater than ourselves helps us to cultivate, because we see it from a higher perspective. We see it outside of our own story and the greater kind of archetypal story that exists. And we see it in a new light. We see it through the eyes of the other people involved in that event, right? Maybe we learn to forgive and have compassion for them too. So I believe the cultivation of faith is essential to our healing journey so that we can live in accordance with the purpose and live a life not overly focused on being filled with happiness, but rather being filled with meaning. I think a life filled with meaning has more depth and is more rich than a life simply filled with happiness, because suffering comes and goes and happiness comes and goes, but meaning and being able to extract meaning from our experiences is something that we can always do. So anyways, if you're still listening to this or watching this, thank you. I share this all from my heart because I genuinely want people to be well. I want people to be healthy. And sometimes I notice things, right? Sometimes I notice things happening out there in the world and in the culture. I hear things that are concerning to me, and I want people to be well. I want people to be emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and physically healthy and vital. And this is just something that's been on my mind for a number of months. And I was really contemplating. I was like, hey, do I talk about this? I don't know. Maybe someone's going to get offended, or someone's going to say, that I'm not seeing it correctly. But maybe that's true. But these are my thoughts on the topic. And I just hope it helps you. Maybe I said something that touches on something for you. Hopefully it helps you overcome it. Hopefully it helps you heal and forgive and move on. And, hopefully it helps you be strong. Hopefully it helps you see things clearly. Hopefully, maybe if you're a practitioner, maybe it helps provide a little insight into those stuck cases, into those people that just don't seem to be getting well or aren't compliant, or for some reason they seem like they actually don't want to get better. Maybe this can provide a little bit of insight and maybe something to discuss with your clients. So anyways, I just hope this serves you well. Thank you very much for making it to the end. I do truly appreciate it. Hopefully you found some insight, hope, encouragement, some faith, belief, some courage to heal. And I thank you for making it to the end of this episode of The Plant Path. Thank you so much. If you're watching or listening anywhere but the School of Evolutionary Herbalism website, head to evolutionaryherbalism.com. Got lots of free material over there for you on herbalism, astrological medicine, alchemy, spagyrics, and just our healing journey as humans, doing our best in this life, on this path. So thank you very much. Hit the like, subscribe button if you have not done so already. Share it with someone that might benefit from hearing this message too. And I really appreciate you being a part of the Evolutionary Herbalism community. And until the next one, take care and be well.